Hi, I'm Roxy, and today I want to check out Mixbox. It's a plugin for natural paint mixing. I'm going to talk a little bit about paint mixing and how it differs on screen as opposed to physical pigment. I'll also showcase the Mixbox plugin using its own online demo as well as within Rebelle 6 Pro. I'll also show you how to get it, and I will throw in a free brush. If you've had any kind of traditional art training, you were likely taught that the primary colors are, of course, red, yellow, and blue, and that you can mix any of the other colors using those three primaries. Now, just as a quick side note, that's not entirely true. You can get a slightly wider color gamut, meaning variety of hues, by using cyan, magenta, and yellow as your primaries. That's why print ink comes in CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and K for black. Though from practice I can tell you it's a lot more difficult to mix nice saturated colors using CMY, so I would suggest sticking with red, yellow, blue painting. But regardless of which of the three primaries you use, if you're mixing physical actual paint with pigment in real life, we call it subtractive color mixing, as opposed to additive color mixing. That's where your RGB comes in. I'm not going to get into that here, but if you are interested, I have a two-part lesson about this in a secret Patreon channel on my Discord. This is the lesson directory so far, and if I do say so myself, they're pretty damn good. Shameless plug aside, the point I want to get across is how colors don't mix as you think they should in your digital painting program. It's most obvious when you mix yellow and blue together. From real life, you expect to see a vibrant grass green like this, but what you get instead is this desaturated kind of khaki green. At the moment I'm in Corel Painter, but this isn't a problem exclusive to Painter. You see the same in PaintStorm Studio, Photoshop, Procreate, and almost all other painting apps except for Rebelle 6 Pro, which has the Mixbox technology built in, but we'll look at that later. Clip Studio Paint version 2 does a decent job mixing the green, but the purple is horrible. This is a comparison of Clip Studio Paint 2 versus Rebelle 6 Pro. I don't think you can even charitably call that purple. At best, it's brick red. Escape Motions graciously gave me a key for Rebelle 6 Pro, so I'll be able to show you some accurate color mixing later in the video. But first, let's head over to the Mixbox website, where they have a handy little online demo. So I've just grabbed some Prussian blue. Let's just lay down some blue on the canvas. By the way, I'm using my Huion Inspiroi 1060p. The reason why I mention that is because I first tried this demo on my iPad using Apple Pencil, and for some reason I had to press excessively hard to even get a hint of paint on the canvas, so I wasn't able to really see what was supposed to happen there because the pressure sensitivity is off, and there doesn't seem to be a way to adjust the pressure sensitivity in this basic little demo that they've got. But that's okay, because here we are. I'm using my PC, and we can see that it does actually work. So if I color pick here, you can see that is a beautiful vivid green that we're getting from mixing these two together. Now, mixing of primaries aside, there's another difference between physical pigment-based paint and digital paint, which I'll show you here. We're on the Winsor & Newton website. You might notice how saturated the paint colors are when they're spread thin. Like here's a blue, for example. You see that is very dark blue, and instead of just going into a faded dark blue, it actually becomes quite saturated as it's spread thin. Now that doesn't happen digitally. Let me just quickly take a screenshot of this. drop this in Corel Painter. Okay, so we can color pick a dark color, and I'm pressing softly. You can see it's not getting more saturated. It's literally just kind of fading into the background. Even if I pick the saturated color, you know, the more I paint on top of it, it doesn't get darker. It just stays that same hue and saturation, and it just kind of fades into the background or becomes completely opaque. So it doesn't work the same way digitally as we see with actual pigment. But Mixbox has got us covered here as well. If I take a Phthalo blue, I actually don't know how to pronounce that. Let's learn together. How'd you say .com?
Phthalo or phthalo.
Phthalo. Okay. What an awkward word. Makes me feel like I'm lisping. Regardless, let's grab some of this. And you can see that as I keep painting on the same spot, it gets quite dark. And around the edges, it gets quite vibrant. So Mixbox has got us covered here as well. Now myself, as a primarily digital painter, absolutely none of that bothers me. I've gotten by, I've learned how to adapt. I either, you know, choose the exact color that I want from the color wheel, or I use the HSV sliders to select what I want, or I just color pick from the actual painting itself. But if you're a traditional painter and you're used to mixing your paints on the palette or on the canvas directly, it can be a bit of a paradigm shift to adapt to digital paint mixing. So much so that you even might want to give up. And honestly, that's a damn shame, because digital painting is great. It's a lot cheaper and you don't have a mess to clean up afterwards. So if that's you, then Mixbox is going to save the day. You could use Rebelle 6 Pro. I do have a coupon code especially for you, which I will put in the description. Valid only for 30 days from today. But if you want to use Mixbox in your other programs, then we need to ask the devs of those apps to add it, because unfortunately, Mixbox is not a plugin you can install yourself. It's a piece of code for a new blending mode. The only way to get it in painting software is if the developers do it. So how we can make that happen a little faster is we can harass the developers of these programs. Mixbox has put links to their forums where we can let them know. Obviously, the more interest they see in natural color mixing, the higher up on their priority list for the next version it will be. I'll also put these links in the description of my video. So I mentioned that Rebelle 6 Pro has Mixbox built in, and as I mentioned, I was quite blessed, and Escape Motions gave me a key for it, so I've been playing around with it for a few days. This was the first painting I did, and I did not use any green. What I mean by that is I did not color pick green and then paint it down on the canvas. I simply used cadmium yellow and ultramarine blue. I put that down on the canvas and I mixed all these different shades of green using those two colors. So you can see it does work quite beautifully. I'm going to show you that right now by painting a brinjal, the one that you saw in the intro. And got a surprise for you if you stay to the end, or I guess if you skip ahead to the end, either way. So what I'm doing here is I'm color picking from a standard oil pastel palette. Because I'm not going to use the color wheel, I'm going to choose 3 primaries and black, and we're going to mix all our colors on the canvas. My aim here is to paint a brinjal, or egg fruit if you prefer, and it's going to be dark purple with a green stem, so we can see how mixing green and purple works in Rebelle as opposed to the previous fails you've seen from other painting programs. As you can see, the colors I've chosen, there's no purple or green in the swatches. These are pretty standard oil colors. We've got Bone Black, Cadmium Yellow Deep, Madder Lake Deep, and Ultramarine Blue. Just on the side here, I'm testing out how I'm going to mix the dark purple. Start with some blue and add some black, although the blue is dark enough that it wasn't really necessary. Note that juicy saturation around the edges, so we can see that the pigment style mixing is working as desired. If you don't like that though, you can also toggle it off here. But of course you do like it, that's why you're still here, right? I add some red and it starts taking on a purplish look. Satisfied with the color mix test, I start laying down an underpaint of that ultramarine blue. Just really working a flat silhouette. I'm not copying any reference straight, but I do have a couple of brinjals on my second screen that I'm roughly referencing. Rebelle has a couple of different painting modes. There's paint, paint and mix, paint and blend, blend and erase. And you can toggle between these modes using the same brush, which is a feature I really like. They're attached to hotkeys 1 to 5, so you'll see different blend modes selected throughout the video without me actually physically clicking it. Now, I don't like things floating around in the air, so I immediately want to get a little bit of cast shadow down. I'm doing that on a separate layer. That's another nice thing about digital painting. I introduce some of the red using the mix and blend mode, and we start to see some purple bubbling up. For the stem, we already have the blue underpaint, so all I need is some of the cadmium yellow, and we can mix in green right here on the canvas. Mixing a little bit of grey in so that I can add a Fresnel effect to the edges. That's also explained in depth in my Patreon art lessons. Got a whole series teaching you how to shade without reference. At some point I'll make it into a video series, but for now my patrons are my guinea pigs. So they get the, let's call it, early access article based lessons. So here I've just color picked the off-white canvas to blend in with the blue for a nice pale blue, which I'm using for both the floor and the background. At this point the brinjal is a little too saturated for my taste, so I add some black in to knock those colors back a bit. I swipe some of that pale blue across the bottom for bounce light from the floor. Adjusting my shadow here, which is still on its own layer. So at this point we've got a layer for the brinjal, a layer for the cast shadow, and a layer for the background. There's a fourth layer there with the palette colors on, which I'll delete, and I'll later add another layer for a signature. Adding a bit of red to the stem. Once I mix it in with the green, it should look a little bit more brown, just to tone down the vibrance. And I'm adding some white for highlights. Now the brush I'm using is one I created myself. The default brushes aren't bad, but And you probably know from previous videos that I'm kind of a brush fanatic. I feel if you can get the hang of the brush engine, then that's 90% of mastering the paint app. So I fiddled around and created this brush that suits me perfectly from a pressure sensitivity point of view, as well as the types of marks I wanted to see. So as we approach the end of the demo, besides the discount code, which I'll post in the description, that is for Rebelle 6 Pro, valid, or actually it's for either Rebelle 6 or Rebelle 6 Pro, but the natural pigment mixing is only available in the Pro version, and this voucher is valid for 30 days from today. Now, as a freebie, I'm also going to give away the brush I used. You can grab it for free from my GUMROAD store. You also have 30 days to grab that. Lastly, thanks to my patrons, and thank you for watching. Much obliged if you leave a like and subscribe. Until the next one, God bless.